Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.
Good to be here with you, man.
Yeah. Good to have you back on, this time in person.
Yeah, this is good. It's surreal when you form these meaningful relationships and connections online and then you finally meet in person.
Yeah.
It's like so backwards for how the human brain is designed to function.
Yeah.
But it's nice.
It was funny because we've connected over video so many times now with our check-ins, with me coaching you and you helping me fix my sacral stress fracture, or the mechanics that maybe led to that, I should say. That I was thinking this morning when I was like telling Nicole, I was like reminding her, I was like, Vinny's coming over to record a podcast. And I was like, I don't think I've met Vinny in person, but it took me a second to remember that because we've seen each other over video so many times now.
Yeah.
It almost feels like we have met in person.
Yeah, I'm watching you walk up to the car. It's like a friend. Hey,
yeah.
It's good seeing you again,
Yeah,
man. But this is our first time meeting.
Yeah, that's the world we live in now, I guess.
Well, thanks for having me out, man. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to have you out here. And it's one of the reasons I love Austin is people like to come through here. So I get to bump into people that maybe I wouldn't see as often because of that. So happy that you were able to make the trip.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so we got a lot to talk about, I think.
Always.
Yeah. So you were one of the first people I reached out to. This would have been almost a year ago at this point. It would have been end of April, maybe. I think end of April is when I first recognized, I think I have a stress fracture.
Yeah, your intuition told you that pretty strong, didn't it?
And it's one of those things where it's like, I haven't had issues with stress fractures throughout my running career. I haven't had issues with bones in general. I've never broke a bone. I've just had 2 stress fractures, but it happens to be in the exact same spot both times. So it was like, when I felt it, I was like, oh, that's not a normal injury. That feels exactly like the time I fractured my sacral. And then I was like, okay, I know what to do in this scenario. And move 1 is do not put weight on it.
Step number 1, stop injuring it.
Yeah, stop doing the thing that created it in the first place. Because it's different with soft tissue stuff. Like some mobilization is usually advised. It's just the right loading with soft tissue. But bone you want to get off of. So luckily I had that intuition and then got that MRI as quickly as possible. I think I knew within 3 or 4 days of feeling it that it was indeed a stress fracture. So at that point, I sort of knew what to not do, but my thought process was kind of, all right, well, I've done this twice now. So clearly whatever I did the first time around, I didn't do entirely correct, or if I did, I deviated enough from it where now I'm back in the same situation. So I'm thinking stress fractures and bone injuries, they can be a lot of different things like stress, nutrition, mechanics, imbalances, just overtraining, all sorts of different things you can consider. So I started kind of turning those stones over. I got some bone scans to make sure I didn't have just the weakest bones on planet Earth.
Yeah.
That was my biggest fear, actually, because it's like, if you get a stress fracture and it's because you have really bad bone density, you've got a whole body problem.
Yeah, it's not just in one bone that acts by itself.
Yeah, that was just the part that failed first, and you may have a lot more failure points coming up. So that was my biggest concern, was hopefully haven't been screwing things up badly enough the last few years where my bones have just gotten to this point where I have a big problem on my hands. I was skeptical that was the case just based on my history of not breaking bones and things like that. So thankfully, I think I actually tested in the top 5% bone density. So I was like, okay, I think I'm good there. Got the blood work done to make sure I didn't have any noticeable deficiencies that I should be mindful of that would lead to something like this. And the thing that stood out the most was just some mechanical stuff. My thought was all right, I think maybe I have a mechanical thing going on here where when I get into kind of the thick of training, 25 years of training puts you in a position where a lot of load is required to add a stimulus on top of what you've done prior. So I was when I get to these peak parts of my training cycle, that's just the spot that fails first. So if I make a mistake in that territory, that's probably going to be the spot that gives me grief. So then I reached out to you because you had been on the podcast before. We can talk about your story again just to remind the listeners a bit, but you broke your back, which sounds worse than your tailbone.
Yeah, it was, it's always hard to compare injuries. I do like to think, the back is just, I think you can limp. You can wrap up a knee, you can put a cast around a foot, but when you break this central joint that is at the core of almost any movement, like I did with my lower back, I was just rendered incapacitated. I mean, I felt useless for almost a decade of my life. So I was an 8-time All-American, Division I athlete, collegiate swimmer. I was really good in the pool, terrible with land activities, but I broke my back in a surfing accident, and I went literally overnight from being what I thought was this elite Superman endurance of an athlete to I can't even stand up right now. And that launched me in an entirely different direction in life, like most life-changing injuries do. And I had to put myself back through school. I had to learn what works and what doesn't work. And unfortunately, I think my story is a lot like most people. When you're in pain, you go see the experts, you go see the specialists, you go see the people that you think or have been told that can help. And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's helpful, and then sometimes you get different opinions, and then sometimes everybody you see says something entirely different. And I just started to spiral out of control. And I remember getting an MRI. This was like 4 or 5 years after. I mean, I still felt broken. I was actually getting worse. I remember getting an MRI and an X-ray, and they both showed the fractures healed, the herniations healed, but I was functionally disabled. So even long after the hard tissue, the bones healed, I was still having so many structural soft tissue problems. And this launched me down the path of now I help people, which is, how do you take a step back from an injury? You can only feel what you can feel. How can we take a step back about it and be objective, not subjective, not go see a foot guy and say all your problems are the foot, go see a hip guy and say all your problems are from the hip. But how do you fundamentally take a step backwards and look at the entire body as a single unit and then devise a game plan from there? And that's really where you and I connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And one thing that you shared with me that I thought was just kind of an interesting piece of advice and something people can use whether they feel great or feel terrible is just like the way the body actually kind of remembers movement patterns. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people listening to this are runners, endurance athletes. They're probably doing some sport, but different sports kind of put our bodies through different ranges of motion. Some more, I would say some better than others in terms of the variety.
I would say that too. Yeah, I would say that too.
And running tends to be one where it gets a little specific, I would say. So if you're just out there running, especially if you're just out there running one intensity or like just not having kind of a variety of terrains and things like that, you kind of keep certain pathways open, but maybe others not so much if you're not accessing them. So I remember when we were first kind of going through just movement protocols and things and assessing kind of where I was needing some work, it was just like, oh, you just haven't been using that in that range of motion. So like the interesting thing you mentioned is like really you just have to like start putting your body through different movement patterns so it keeps remembering them or keeping them open. And one thing you said was just like the act of sitting is interesting because I think people will hear that, and a lot of people they've heard some sort of like a clever phrase of like sitting is like smoking, or
sitting's the new smoking.
Yeah. And it's like, well, sitting is not necessarily bad. It's just one position. Mm-hmm. So if you're only in that one position, you'll feel comfortable there, but you're not exposing your body to other ones. So then you mentioned sitting on the ground. Yeah. Is this option that you have available to you? And we avoid it because if you sit on the ground for a couple of minutes, you want to move because you're like, this isn't comfortable anymore. Mm-hmm. But that's the point.
That's exactly the point. A chair is so darn comfortable that we could literally be here for 8 to 12 hours. There's almost little to no access to the core muscles, the muscles that support and stabilize our body. The chair, like we're sitting back and leaning back right now, the chair is doing most of the work, which makes it so darn comfortable. And then we wonder why at the end of the day, after hours of sitting, our muscles don't feel good. They don't feel primed and ready for motion. They feel stiff and tight and achy. It's because we're not utilizing them. And when you bring your body down to the floor, there was a study, and I think I might have pointed towards it on our last podcast. There was a study done that people who sit on the floor assume over 100 positions in order to just be on the floor. Mm-hmm. We're not sitting in 100 different positions on the chair. We're maybe sitting on both hips, or one leg's crossed over the other, or we lean to one hip or the other. There's no variation. And all of us, with the exception of people who are born with congenital issues or structural deformations, most of us are born with this blank slate of a high capacity to move. I mean, you go look at a kid and their movement's incredible. Without the help of expensive movement coaches, or they're not on a specific training program, they can squat beautifully. They squat upright. They've got so much access to movement. And where things start to go weird for most people is as we develop, we have certain interests and hobbies. You enjoy running. And as you do these things you enjoy more, you become a specialist in those things. Mm-hmm. And when you become a specialist, you lose that well-rounded capacity to move like a generalist. And so many people who have these musculoskeletal injuries, these movement impairments, these chronic injuries that just kind of keep showing up in the same area, that itself is not the root cause. The root cause is how the body's become so specialized to the thing that we are now doing. There are movements that we do, and there are movements that we don't do. And both of those shape the way that we move and feel every single day. And when you look at a runner, they do this very short, limited range of motion repetitively over and over and over. And it's why runners notoriously are really stiff, bending forward to put their shoes on in the morning, and especially post-run. We are losing that well-roundedness, and we're becoming so specialized. And the body has a really hard time when it becomes so specialized. It can do a thing really well, but then you challenge it, like you got to go help a friend move, and now you have to go lift heavy furniture or go into ranges of motion that running doesn't do, and we throw our back out, or we just run right into our limitations and experience the next injury. So the trick is to do the things that we love doing and not become so specialized that we can't do those things anymore. We've got to keep it well-rounded. We've got to keep our movement patterns tame so we can still be human and not just do that one thing and one thing only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think like runners probably have a little bit of a sense of false security too, because it's like this easy to access activity. Mm-hmm. And if you got at it early in life like I did, you sort of have this like assumption where, well, I'm doing my workouts, I'm staying in shape, I'm fit. Yeah. I'm checking that box on whether you're trying to compete or you're just, you're looking for an activity to kind of say, okay, well, I'm doing the things that I'm supposed to do to help with longevity, to help with fitness and all that stuff. But you're also kind of forgetting like there's those other movement patterns that don't just stay there. And I think for me, it was like, when I grew up, I did a ton of different sports. So I sort of had that built into my routine where, mm-hmm. yeah, I was a runner. I was better at that than I was all the other sports. So it was kind of the one, but certainly by my senior year in high school, I was focusing on running as like, this is the one I really want to maximize. But I was doing so much other stuff too. Not only was I young and a lot more responsive probably still, but I was putting myself through these variety of movements, these different strength routines and stuff like that I could probably get away with more from just kind of living life. Whereas now, you could become an adult and you have all these other things you got to do outside of the sport you're doing.
Like surviving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So then it's like all the time goes towards the activity of interest versus having that kind of that framework of variety there that's just going to kind of keep those things in place more or less.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of a question. So now that I've gone from elite athlete, broke my back, and with your help, once I was able to understand what I need to do to become pain-free, I had my eyes set towards running an ultra. And I remember you were the first person I reached out to for help in learning how to do that. I was grossly underqualified for how to go run 50 miles. I knew how to rehab somebody's pain, but I did not know how to go run 50 miles. And that process was so enlightening for me. And me now sharing that I'm running and I'm capable of doing these amazing feats of endurance and accomplishments with my body, people will reach out to me, and the question they ask, is, hey, how do I go train for a marathon? How do I go mm-hmm. get ready for an ultra? And my question, because I don't have the answer for them. I know what I did. You're a guy who has an answer for that. But my question back to them is always, well, how many do you want to do? Do you just want to do one? Because if you only want to do one, I could probably just tell you brute strength, this is how we're going to do it. But if you're somebody who wants to do it again and again, if you want this to be your life, we have to be able to take a step back and understand a well-rounded approach is going to get you to do that. And if you're injured, if the same thing's showing up, it's a really great sign that we got to take a step back and look at becoming a little bit more well-rounded.
I'm excited to announce that I launched a new group coaching option. So to go along with my personalized one-on-one coaching options and my pre-made plans that I have on my website at zachbitter.com, this year I'm starting a group of online endurance runners who want to work with me in a slightly different model. So if you're interested in checking that out, just head to my website at zachbitter.com, go to the coaching tab. From there, you'll be directed to the team coaching option, and you can sign up for that and get onboarded to join the group. Yeah, and this topic just in general has gotten more and more interesting to me because the last few years I've done some episodes on this, and technically you fit this mold to some degree. It's like the hybrid athlete, where the sport of ultra running, when I got into it, it was sort of like a destination for people that had a running background. So I'd get the typical person, and this wasn't 100% of the time, but more often than not, I could bet on if someone reached out for coaching, they would probably have this huge foundation of low intensity running. Like that was what I was dealing with in terms of like, this is the starting point. What do we do next? Whereas now I'm getting clients who are coming from totally different backgrounds, sometimes not running at all. And that's a whole different question almost too, because like the strengths, it's almost like a polarizing strength and weakness between those two groups, where like I'm working with either one, I try to simplify things for them so that they kind of have an understanding of like, this is what we're going to kind of do, generally speaking, and whichever inputs we focus on the most at which stage is just going to depend on where you're at and then what you're actually preparing for. But if we take those two extremes, like the person who's like, oh, I'm an ultra runner, I just run a lot of long, slow miles, or I was a strength athlete, but I was watching this David Goggins video, and now I'm going to run 100 miles.
Yep. Tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow too. Yeah.
Tomorrow.
It's like, okay, so I have one person here who has a deficiency in potentially strength and speed work. Then I have this other person here who has, like, not only do they not have a deficiency in strength, they've probably in some cases 2x'd the loading zone for optimal running performance in terms of what they can do from a strength standpoint. And their high intensity fitness has just been worked on year and year and year after year. So we have two very different starting points there. The ultra runner who has just been doing a lot of long, slow miles, we can probably jump into a speed work development phase pretty quick in that plan, and that's going to move the needle for them. Versus, say, the strength athlete who comes in, they have an aerobic deficiency, if anything. So like that person needs to probably really kind of chill out and maybe even do some walking and hiking during some of the early stages running. So we're going to be probably focusing on different intensities to start. And they may both be training for 100 miles too. That's the funny thing about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, and those are two extremes. I think there's also some middle ground in there where people are at, but it makes it interesting from a kind of coaching standpoint where I try to first just kind of highlight with a coaching client, here are some key intensities that I think are valuable that we'll work on along the way. The real question is just going to be the order of operations, and that's going to be determined by the event intensity you're training for and where you're at currently. So like we talked about this when I started first working with you, is like I like to take the easy category, a moderate category, and like a higher intensity category, and that's like the most simplest way to look at it for the intensity spectrum. And then from there we can divide those categories up into multiple different categories within them if we want to or need to. But generally speaking, that easy category, we have like easy recovery, and then what I call like base. And that base intensity is kind of like what some people call it zone 2. It's just like that top end of the easy category. So someone who's got an athletic background like you but hasn't had a lot of running experience,
Zero.
Yeah, we need to spend a lot of time in that easy category and maybe wait a little bit before we start dropping in some of that moderate intensity stuff, the higher intensity stuff, which you may have already had some proficiency in from prior sports and things like that, or just interests along the way. But I think what we were talking about before we hit record was just like, you get this new group of people coming into running, getting excited about running, wanting to do that. We get the hybrid athletes, or just people in general who have been doing it for a while but have been doing it without really any guidance. Is like, how do you take all the noise you see out online and everywhere about like, this is what you should do, this is the best thing to improve your race, and how do you like weave your way through all that and actually like create an actionable plan where you're doing the right thing for you versus what you listen to on on a podcast or saw on an Instagram reel or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, because we are deeply motivated and inspired by the people who are doing the things that we want to do, and then we hear what they're doing, and then we go do what they're doing. But if you go right back to what you just said, what moves the needle for each person is entirely different. And you could be training for the same 100-mile race. Somebody's going to need to figure out how to learn how to run easy. Somebody else is going to be ready for speed work right at the start. And so that assessment period is crucial, regardless of who you are and where you're at. Before we solve a problem like how to run 100 miles or how to bend forward and not have pain, we have to get first clear on where are we right now? What is that assessment capacity? And then doing what is best for you. And typically what is best for you is becoming well-rounded. And, you know, for me, if well-rounded looks like you being able to stand on your right leg the same as your left leg, you being able to, when you bend forward, both hips move and work at the same time. These are the basics. And I think before anybody looks for specifics, this is the problem. And I'm speaking about this problem because I did this for years and I got nowhere for years. I had this huge traumatic back injury, and I was looking for specific solutions to solve for that back pain, while I was avoiding and overlooking the basics, the fundamentals, the foundation of movement. Could my right hip move like my left hip? Does my right ankle move like my left ankle? How do both shoulders work? How can my spine move, or how can it not move? I'm talking about like the simple basics, and you don't need to be an orthopedic surgeon to understand the basics of motion. We have to look at it. Can the right side move like the left? Do the muscles in the front of the body work like the muscles in balance with the back of the body? What are the basics of movement first? Let's build a foundation of basics. And once that foundation is there, then we can go into specifics. So I'll speak very specific to your injury. The injury was with the foot, right? Or is with a sacral area. That was a specific area that was in pain. So instead of acutely focusing on that area, what you and I did was we took a step back and we looked at the basics. What happens when Zach stands on his left leg?
Yeah.
And is it the same thing that happens when he stands on his right leg? And just with photographic objective evidence, we saw that there was a very big discrepancy between the right and left leg. And now we can start to solve that problem because we're looking at how the basics are not being met. And most people, I don't want to speak for you, you're the running coach here. If you're running into a problem with your training plan, I'd have to imagine it's because some basics are being overlooked. And maybe the basics is being well-rounded, having a shared equal amount of time of sprint work and endurance work and hard tempo runs. I mean, people just want to lean into the specifics first. How can I run further? How can I run faster? But are we well-rounded? Can we do this in a well-rounded approach? And I think the scary thing for a lot of people is well-rounded. Most people emotionally relate to that as taking a step back and going to the elementary fundamentals, and they want to just do more and be more. But those fundamentals, man, that's what gets you there. And we lose, and I'm saying we because me too, for 10 years of my life, I lost sight of those basics and fundamentals, which is why I got nowhere with it. And it was only coming back to what's missing. Was I able to actually fundamentally then go get into the specifics? So I say it on my own, in my own program to members every week, basics before specifics. We can't even get to specifics if the basic fundamentals aren't there yet. And if that's the overarching theme today, then I think that's going to serve a lot of people well.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think it's where our kind of passions run parallel with one another is when I think of like when we were working together, when I first pinged you about my situation, I thought for sure you were going to assess me and you're going to be like, okay, here's this like strength movement that is going to be like, it's going to get that spot that's been problematic for you up to speed. And once it's up to speed, boom, you're off to the races. And you were like, no, we need to get everything talking to one another in the right way before we even consider strength work or something like that. That would be, a secondary step at best. So that's kind of similar to like what you were saying with training, where one of the biggest kind of surprises I think I'll have sometimes with new coaching clients who are training for an ultra marathon is like they're very focused on what they're trying to accomplish, which is finishing that race of 100 miles. So they think like, all right, he's going to be throwing all sorts of volume at me. I'm going to be doing these massive long runs on every weekend from day one to when I taper. And I look at it like, if we have like this beautiful 6-month buildup, we're probably going to spend the first 2/3 of that basically just making you a well-rounded runner. So that like you're well developed or appropriately developed. The way I like to look at it is like, you won't be your best at any endurance event from let's say 5K up to 100 miles, but you'll be pretty good and able to do any of those at like close to what you're like one step away from perfecting any of those. When I have them there, then it's just a question of what are you actually training for? So like if they are training for a 5K, well, we're going to spend the next 8 to 10 weeks working on the specifics of a 5K. If they're running a 100 mile, we're going to spend the next 8 to 10 weeks working on what's specific for the 100 mile stuff. So I'll get like these ultra runners who are like getting a little antsy because they're like, where's this like 8-hour long run on the weekend? Oh, man. And it's like, we'll get there. We'll get there. But I like to get them nice and running fit, and then let's take that fitness so that when we do start building out your ultra long run, which let's be honest, if you're running 100 miles, we call it running, but it's a combination of running and hiking. And in almost every case, like even the people winning these races, if it's a mountain course, which is where a lot of people are heading, you're going to be doing some hiking. It's very rare that you see someone running the entire way. So that's a component that we want to consider with the long run. So I think like people sort of get into this mindset of like exactly what they'll be doing on race day, and that's going to make up this like massive portion of the training, when in reality it's like specificity. Let's get to it when it's the most important at the end, and let's get you there where every input we do with that is done at such a high quality, because you're just a very fit endurance athlete, that we're going to get more value out of every minute you spend out doing the things specific to what you'll be doing on race day.
You just reminded me, I remember when I completed my first 50-mile race. So there's two things I got to say to that. The first one is when I completed my first 50-mile race, and I was bragging to everybody about it. I just ran 50 miles. And I remember the first time somebody asked me, well, how much of that did you walk? It's like, I don't want to answer that. Yeah. I ran 50 miles. I walked a lot of it though. that last third of that race was I was on the struggle bus for sure with that. That was really hard. But going back to what you were talking about, I reached out to you to hire you as my coach. I believe it was like 6 or 7 weeks before my first ultra, and training was not going well. I mean, I was doing it on my own. Not only did I struggle hitting the 4-hour long run mark, but that recovery from those 4 hours, I mean, I couldn't move for the next 4 or 5 days. I mean, It just depleted my capacity to move. So not only could I not run for long, but those long runs completely took it out of me. And it was funny that you had the expectation that I was going to give you something hyper strength specific to go get into that one entry spot. I thought you were going to give me some golden answer, or like a nutrition supplement that I hadn't had yet that was just going to go unlock things. And I remember the first thing that you asked me to do, go run 40 minutes at like a 2 to 3 intensity, and let's then talk about it. And I didn't even understand 2 to 3. I was only knowing how to run hard. And you were like, hey, let's pull off the gas a little bit. Let's go get some metrics and times. What does a 40 run 2 to 3 out of 10 intensity look like? And it was the same thing. I thought it was going to be something magical and really hyper specific and hard. But you brought me back down to the basics. And just in that one simple basic conversation, I realized I was doing my 4-hour run like an 8 or 9 out of 10 intensity. Yeah. No wonder why I was dying, man. No wonder why I was dying. And you brought it back to the basics of how can I run and make it easy so I can then do it for long. Yeah. And that was really eye-opening.
This is probably my favorite topic with ultramarathon training, or endurance training in general, is opportunity cost. So, because it's like just one of those things where in your mind, it just makes more sense to do it the way you did, because you're thinking, I need to be ready to suffer for hours and hours and hours. So clearly I should be able to go and run 4 hours. If I can't do that, then I'm useless. That's kind of the mindset I think people get themselves into, or they're looking for the peace of mind of, okay, I did 4 hours, I'm going to be able to do this, versus you go for 40 minutes, like you feel so separated from the task at hand, stopping at 40 minutes when you might be running all day, and then in some cases through the night.
Yeah.
that it becomes this daunting thing where I think people have a hard time kind of backing up. But when we look at it practically, if I send you out for a 4-hour run and it takes you the remainder of that next week to recover and do it again, we had 4 hours of work likely done at low quality because you started out fast. So there's maybe a ton of quality in that first hour.
But first 30 minutes is good.
Lots of quality there.
Yeah.
But then not much in the last part. So then when we look at that, like by the time you get around to being able to do something of value again, how many days and opportunities did we miss? So let's say you go for 45 minutes instead, and the next day you feel fine, and you go and do 45 minutes again, and then the next day 45 minutes again, the next day 45 minutes again. And by the time you get to that spot where you would have recovered from that 4-hour session, you've done 5 hours of work at a very high quality, and you felt pretty good the entire time. So then you start getting, I think, positive about like, oh yeah, my body does respond to this. I'm seeing progress. I'm seeing quality. It's not looking like kind of like failure to be able to do what you're trying to do. And then you build on that. And then eventually you do get to the point where the opportunity cost becomes, oh, I'm pretty fit now. So if I go out and just do like, a couple 1-hour runs or 45-minute runs, it's probably not going to move the needle. It's just going to maintain. So if we're there, now we can afford to skip a few of those to do a really long run, to practice the things we'll be doing on race day, fine tune the skills and the adaptations that are actually going to be like usable on race day. And we don't have to worry about as much what are we missing out on, because to some degree you've already accomplished that. So it's sometimes hard, I think, for people to kind of wrap their head around that process, but it's the way. Hey folks, just a quick reminder that this podcast sponsors include S Fuels. They have a 15% offer for you. Element Electrolytes, they have a free sample pack offer for you. John G Apparel has 10% off. And Delta G Ketones has a 20% off and free consultation offer for you. Links and details can be found in the show notes and the episode landing page. You can also check out a full description of how I use all of these products in my own training and racing at the end of this podcast episode.
It was hard. What was astounding is how hard it was for me to wrap my head around that process. And I teach that to everybody. If I were to given you some hyper-specific strength movement that we could have done day one, and you would have been on the couch for the next 4 days, but we really got it in. Like I really wowed you, and because of my own ego, I flexed my ability to understand your body and put you into these really challenging positions. You would have perceived so much value. You would have been limping for the next 4 days. We didn't really do anything of value there. And so it comes back down to like the basics and getting you who, world record holder, you've done incredible things. And our first session was actually to get you to not move. Let's take the movement out. Let's make it so gentle. Let's start lying on your back. Let's look at the body that you're bringing into every run, and let's change that. Let's not touch your running. Let's not touch your strength program. Let's just help you work a little better so the body that you bring into everything works a little better. Just like you helped me make running a little easier, so every time I ran, I kind of knew what I was doing a little bit better. And that's where some amazing changes can be made.
I had a paradigm shift in my mind when we were working together that I looked at mobility before that as like something that I could use to access the activity I wanted to do. So in my mind, that was like, okay, if I do this mobility routine, I can start the run and feel good. So if I was running in the morning, I do the mobility routine before the run in the morning. If I'm running in the afternoon, I do the mobility routine before the run in the afternoon. So it's always this like kind of warm up type mentality for it. When I started doing the program that you gave me that was specific to my needs, what I started recognizing is it doesn't matter when I do it. I just have to do it. And if I do it consistently, whenever I do the run, it's going to feel way better. So I wasn't like in this situation where with no mobility, I go for a run, I feel like the first mile or two, I'm working through all these kinks and this uncomfortable situation. And then all of a sudden I get warmed up and it's like, okay, now I can actually feel like I'm kind of just like grooving here. To like, all right, I do this mobility routine and then maybe I can start the run feeling good, but I have to do it before every run. To like, oh, I just got to be consistent with the program. If I'm consistent with the program, I think it was maybe about 3 or 4 weeks in, I started noticing like, oh, I go out for the run and it was weird because I had gotten so used to like the first few steps feeling a certain way and normalizing that to like, I take the first few steps, it just felt different. It was like, oh, I'm already 3 miles into this thing. Like,
Yeah.
it was eye-opening.
And I do not mean this as advice. I'm just sharing this as my personal experience with it. People want to know what my now warm-up routines are. Corrective exercise specialist. What is your
What's he doing? Yeah.
I just put on my running shoes and I run lightly at the start. There is no exhaustive warm-up routine because I spend so much time on my body all day out. I mean, it's not an all-day thing, but my specific mobility and functional movements help maintain the integrity of my movement. So when it comes time to move, I can do that. I don't need some exhaustive long warm-up. For example, I don't have a severe hip imbalance that is putting way more load and pressure on my right leg than my left leg, which is going to stress out the right tendons compared to the left tendons, which means that when if you didn't have a good warm up and you just started running, that right side tendon would start to hurt. You'd start to receive way more force and load than the left side. So somebody who has a severe imbalance is going to feel like they need a massive warm up just to get their body somewhat functional and capable enough to go do an activity. But if we can focus on becoming well-rounded, we can go in and out of any activity we want. Of course, there's a warm-up period within that activity, but we're run ready now. We're run ready at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 p.m. at night, whatever that time frame is, because your neuromuscular system understands its capacity and its job to help you move. It's not already in a state of disarray, sympathetic, fight, flight, freeze, because things aren't working and we're not getting the movement that we need that's medicine on a daily basis. And then we go add load to it. The point of mobility work is to get stress out of the body, to get blood, oxygen, and nutrients flowing. And when we have a stress system and then go put on running shoes and immediately expose our body to stress, we're already bringing a stressed body into a stressful event. This is why running usually doesn't feel good for a lot of people. Not because running itself is bad, it's the bodies we're bringing into running that are already at their threshold of stress management. And then you're going to throw on explosive load and float force and plyometric and excessive shock absorption on top of that. It tends to just freak people out, which is why even after a run, people feel good. And then this clock kind of starts ticking until your body says, ooh, that wasn't good. We're going to be on the couch for a couple days. So the goal of mobility work is to be capable of moving whenever it is that you need to move. I think about, and don't poke too much at this logic. I haven't worked it out too much, but it makes for a nice story. I think about our ancestors, like what did they do for hunts? Did they do a lot of stretches and warm up? Like, did they go do 15 minutes of, no, dude, they
like, hopefully that rabbit is going to stay there for 15 minutes so I can stretch.
It's going to be gone. No, that's not how it is. And so if we want to get back to a natural state of movement, being capable of moving when we need to move, then we have to approach that when it comes to mobility. How can I train my body in natural ways that allow me to become more versatile and well-rounded so I can just do the things that I want to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting stuff too. And it's really humbling because you start recognizing, oh yeah, this is an area that clearly needs work, because you do something that you would have assumed was just kind of trivial that is actually challenging. And that's how I would describe the mobility routine you gave me.
I remember our first session having you lie on your back. So after it became clear that the right leg and the left leg, there was just two different things going on. And we could have spent hours diagnosing and analyzing which muscle, which joint. We had to make it simple. Right leg and left leg were doing two different things. And I remember bringing you down to the ground and just getting your right ankle to move. It was really simple. And it was so basic. And in its simplicity and basicness, I mean, you're a runner. Your legs are very optimal. But just asking a ankle joint to become an ankle again, it is profound sometimes when we slow everything down and we just look directly and objectively at what is the capacity of this joint to do its job by itself. Let's not even talk about dynamic human movement. Let's not talk about compound motion, getting multiple joints and muscles to work. Let's just start off and get real. How does the ankle move? How does the knee move? And how does the hip move? And when you can do really specific corrective exercises that expose that, you don't need some huge, specific, very complicated approach to resolve your body. We just got to get that to move better. And we got to get that to move better. And the exercises that expose the problem are the same exercises that resolve the problem if we do those long enough, right? If I gave you a foot exercise and it's exposing a very interesting problem that was not on your radar, well, your experience is that because you're asking your body to do something it can't do. So keep doing it and your body will be able to do it over time. And as you adapt to these functions, you become less specialized as a runner and you get closer to becoming more human and well-rounded, which then makes you a better runner. Mm-hmm. It's really cool.
I want to give the listeners a challenge. You can tell me this is a terrible idea.
Please.
Because this is one of the eye-opening spots for me was you had me go on my back and lift my leg up so my shin calf was like parallel to the ground. So I had it lifted up. And you just had me do 60 seconds of clockwise ankle rotation, 60 seconds of counterclockwise rotation, and then 60 seconds of plantar dorsal flexion. Mm-hmm. So 3 minutes each leg. And my ankles were burning so badly.
Screaming.
Yeah.
I remember the face you were making, like, I can go run 20, 30 miles.
I probably look more comfortable at the end of that.
Yeah, really. Specialize in what you were doing. Mm-hmm. And then I give you a basic foundational functional exercise. And it's eye-opening sometimes how we drift away from the basics because we become so specialized. So I do want everybody to try that. I think that's a great idea. Lay on your back, lift your right leg up so your right hip and knee is at 90 degrees, and then just do 60 seconds of clockwise right foot circles, 60 seconds of counterclockwise, and then 60 seconds of pointing and flexing your foot. Get your toes to move. And I want you to make it that easy. And what should happen, ideally, this is boring. It's just a foot exercise. Muscles and nerves and bones can all move and cooperate and synchronize together. What you might find is, oh my gosh, why is this so hard? And then watch what happens when you do the other side. Notice how your experience is different. Notice how your cadence, the way that your foot moves, the path. So maybe one foot was circular and the other foot is like a triangle. It's like jittery and choppy and shaky. What is the quality of your right foot's movement compared to your left foot's movement? And if either of those legs were hard, that already tells you something meaningful that you might not have known, which is these muscles don't really work that well. And if we're lying on our back, asking these muscles to just move the joints without load, we're not managing our body weight, we're not lifting any weights, we are unloaded lying on our back. If there is dysfunction showing up here, what on earth is happening when we're putting our body weight on it? What's happening with each and every step? And if there's a difference on one leg compared to the other, there has to be a difference moving. If you have a movement imbalance at rest, that's the body we're bringing into motion. So now the question becomes, how are you adapting? How is this problem showing up when you run? Does it mean you land on the outer edge of the right foot twice as hard as the left foot? Does it mean your knee collapses medially with each and every stride? Does it mean that your right hip is missing internal rotation and extension, which shortens your stride on your right leg, meaning now we are actually taking 2 different stride lengths per leg? And the most important thing I want you to get from that is how you might not know any of that. It's normalized. We normalize suboptimal and we normalize dysfunction because we don't know any better. We didn't know until we slowed you down, hey, this is what's happening on the right leg versus the left leg. Let's carefully go after this one simple, gentle exercise at a time. And in that simplicity, we denormalized suboptimal. We all of a sudden took a look at, oh, this is not working the way it should. And that's where the value can be in taking such a simple step back and doing this little checklist of what really happens when I move.
Mm-hmm. Is there there's I know we talked about kind of like the standing on one leg to see kind of the imbalance, which obviously your insight was very valuable, but I could have noted if I'd known okay, just do that assessment, I would have been able to visually see that there was a problem there. Whether I would have done the right thing after that is anyone's guess.
Yeah.
But
That's where I come in.
yeah, right, exactly. So is there like, if someone was listening to this and they're just like, are there like a few things I can just do like that where I'm looking in a mirror and doing these positions that would highlight if it's like a degree of concern above and beyond other things like that?
Yeah, so there's a lot you can do, and this is the beautiful part. You just need a phone, and you don't even need a phone to take your photos. Like the listeners right now, if any of this is kind of making sense, if you feel like, oh, I wonder what's going on in my body, I want you to stand up right now, take your socks and shoes off, just maybe kind of stand in place, march around, just kind of like loosen up a little bit and relax, and then stop marching. And the first thing I want you to do is visually look down at your feet. What are they doing? Are they both pointed forwards, or is one foot pointed out more than the other? Is one foot slightly stepping in front of the other foot, right? What we're looking for is there rotation? Is there asymmetrical movement, muscular imbalance in the body? And maybe visually things look okay. Maybe everything looks neutral and aligned. All right. Well, take a moment and close your eyes and then answer, do you feel equal weight on both feet? You don't need to be an expert in movement to feel, are you standing on your right leg more or your left leg more? And let's start to ask deeper questions. I wonder what that has to do with why you're feeling what you feel. Does you just at rest, without even doing any movement tests, just standing up in place, are you able to register, oh, I'm on the front foot of my left foot and my right heel. That's different. I've never noticed that before. And just standing up in place, is there a muscle? Is there a joint like a knee or a hip? Is there a muscle group like a left calf, left hamstring, or your right upper neck? Is there an area on your body that you feel like is doing more work than the rest? The information is here. We just have to take a moment and slow down. And instead of deferring ourselves and subjecting ourselves to experts to analyze us, you're the only one hardwired to your nervous system. You can actually feel, if you go slow enough, exactly what's going on with your body. Now, you might not be able to make sense of that yet, and that's okay. This is where a little bit of expertise and guidance comes in. But another simple thing you can do is, while I have you listening and your shoes are off and you're standing here, walk around. Just walk back and forth in whatever space that you're walking in. And take a moment to recognize that if the foot should land with the heel, so your heel strikes the ground, and your foot should gently, like a rocking chair, roll off, and all of your weight should roll over your big toe. Each foot as you're walking should have this smooth rocking chair motion. Does that happen the same on the right foot compared to the left? Is one feeling a little floppy, like it hits the ground a little harder? Can you hear if one foot is landing the ground harder? And as you're walking around back and forth, do you feel like one foot is spending more time on the ground? Do both arms swing the same, or is one arm swinging more than the other? So here's a normal thing. Walking is our main source of locomotion. It helps get us from point A to point B. But have you ever looked at how you walk? Walking could be one of the greatest assessments that you ever have access to, because it is your primary source of locomotion, unless you're Zach Bitter. Unless you're a runner, who that's your primary source of locomotion. Every movement is a test, and every test is a movement. You standing is a movement and a test. You walking is a movement and a test. Bending forward, squatting, reaching one arm overhead, reaching the other. It's so simple, and it's so revealing if we can just go slow enough and do these little health, neuromuscular health movement checklists. So there's a lot. And if you want more of my help, I put together something that I call the Pain Assessment Toolkit. It's 8 assessments where I teach you how to take photos of your body. And it's interactive, and I ask you questions. I have you pull up your phone and look at, do both shoulders look level? Do both sides of your hips? Are both knees pointed in the same position? I kind of coach and guide the experience for you to kind of walk through what is actually happening with your body. Because if we're not assessing, we're just guessing. If you're in pain and you're trying to look for how to get out of pain without assessing, you're gonna do what I did for a very long time. Hopefully not. I really hope that's not the case, but you're just gonna go around in circles thinking the pain is the problem, and you're missing oh my gosh, I can't even stand on my right leg. Not anywhere near as good as my left leg. Let's start there. Let's make that better, and then watch what happens to your experience with running. Let's watch how your recovery times go down. Let's watch how your speed improves, because the body you're bringing into the event is far more functional and capable.
As a way to thank the listeners for helping me grow this podcast over the years, I'm going to continue a raffle option for all of you to have a chance to win a free consultation with me. So it's a 30-minute consultation that I will raffle off once per month. All you have to do to enter is share the episodes that you enjoy on whatever platform you find most interesting. The only thing I ask you to do is, if it's a social media channel, make sure you tag me so I see it and can save that and enter in the raffle. Or if it's somewhere else that you can't tag me at, take a screenshot and send that to me at hpopodcast@gmail.com. You can also enter the raffle by writing a show review on your favorite podcast listening platform. So if you do that, take the screenshot, send it to hpopodcast@gmail.com, and I will enter you in that monthly raffle. March's raffle winner is Renner Winston. Renner won by reposting an episode on X. Congratulations, Renner. I will reach out with details. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another interesting thing when we were working together too was I always like to have the assessment be something that can motivate me. Mm-hmm. So, it would have been different had I been we had not been tracking any of this. You just had me doing that routine and then we checking in. You ask me how I'm feeling, watching it, and not giving me any feedback. I would just kind of been going through the motions almost kind of blindly. But like you were like taking pictures, taking videos, putting up on that software with like the line graph so we could actually see like where the balance actually was or wasn't in my case in some spots, to where like, now we hit like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You could just see the progress. And then it's like the feedback for me is like similar with running, where it's like when I'm building out a training plan, I like to have, obviously the goal race is a great motivator, especially early on because you're like excited to do it. But then you get into the thick of things and you need other assessment tools to show that you're doing the right things and to feel like you're winning, so to speak, in the day-to-day versus just I'm on this long journey to get to this destination I planned out. So that was like such a powerful thing for me to know, like, oh, this like 30 minutes per day I'm spending on this routine is actually yielding results, because you'd have me do this exact same thing every time, and every time we'd look at the pictures, be like, oh, this is where we're heading. This is where we're heading. So there was that like more shorter term feedback too, in terms of like this is actually having a meaningful impact. So I didn't even have to get to the point where I was running more smoothly in my mind's eye. I actually had that visual assessment available too.
It is the one of the most valuable lessons, and I might say this 10 more times on this podcast, but if you get one thing from me today, it's be very clear of what your North Star is, because it is going to determine your entire experience with your body and your life. So let me give you an example. If your North Star as a runner is, I just want to be able to run 50 miles or not, right? Imagine if that's your assessment. Can I run 50 miles or not? There's nothing meaningful. There's no measurements or accessible data if that's your North Star. If your North Star is to just get out of pain, like how I was to help you, if our only conversation was, hey man, you in pain today or not? Is your pain better? Yes or no? It gives you no meaningful metrics as to, are we actually incrementally making progress getting closer to our North Star? The assessments are our milestones. They are the things that help keep us on track, because in a very fast world, asking somebody to slow down for 15 to 30 minutes a day, if you have no meaningful way of measuring if that's helpful or not, the question's not if it's going to work or not. The question is, how long are you going to do this before you quit? Because you're not engaged in this process. And if you don't see meaningful, measurable results with the things that you've identified and have resonated as a problem, how long can you keep going before you quit? I think the easiest way to understand that is, if I told you to go run 50 miles and meet me at a certain place. If you didn't know where that place was, if you didn't have a GPS unit to actually show you step by step how to get there, how long would you run before doubt? Am I even doing the right thing? Am I moving in the right direction? How much longer do I have? How much longer have I gone? Without something that ties you to the present moment that can provide meaningful, valuable data to help you move forward, like a simple stand on one leg assessment photo, or a simple bend forward, or you tracking your experience within the exercises, those little minute changes over time are going to show you, I might not be pain-free yet, but I'm on my way. And it's the developing a meaningful system that helps you get on your way. That's the North Star. It's not running the 50 miles. It's not getting pain-free. My North Star should be how can I develop a meaningful system of measurements and assessments so I know that I'm on the way, because then you can crush any goal you have. You can get out of pain, and you can go run the race that you want to run. And your North Star being that, you're focused on the fundamentals. You're focused on your foundation. You're focused on what can I do today to make tomorrow better, not just crushed by this overwhelming goal of running a really far distance, or for some people, this really overwhelming goal of being pain-free again. That might seem so inaccessible if you someone like me who spent almost a decade in pain.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about, because I think we have a similar friend, Aaron Alexander, or acquaintance at least, who he said something to me once when I asked him a question, and you said something very similar. And I started kind of like tracking what you guys were getting at with this. And because it's like anything, I think, and this is maybe just my competitive nature to some degree, where it's like, Aaron, I can't remember what he was doing, but I think I asked him like how important is it, should I be able to do that? What do I have to do to be able to do that? And he was like, well, like, I don't know. Do you need to be able to do that? And I was like, I started thinking about it. I was like, you know what? Like, maybe there is like a degree of which I need to be able to do certain things and not necessarily be like the best at it in order to access the things I'm trying to access. So when I was working with you, we were working on my hamstrings, I think. So you had me sitting up against the wall with my legs out, just kind of in that like 90-degree angle, just to get comfortable with that angle. And you showed me a picture of this person who was way more flexible than I am, and she could essentially bend herself over in half and kind of hug her lower legs because she had so good mobility and flexibility in that hamstring area, which was like, universes away from where I was. So my first thought was like, oh, I should probably be able to get to that. And you, I think you said like, we could get you there if that became a goal of yours. If you decided today, like, hey, I want to be able to stand up straight and then bend over and completely fold myself in half. Like, that is something we could work towards. But is that a goal that you need to have? And what value would that add to what you're actually trying to do? So my thought with that was like, you guys probably like can think of 1,000 different things that any individual you're working with could improve. And then there's a spectrum of degree to which they can improve that. So how much of that when you're working with someone is just assessing like, what is it that you want to do in your lifestyle, and let's organize things in a way where you have access to those things, versus just kind of trying, I guess the way to say it would be like overwhelm them with like so many different things they could be doing that they don't necessarily need.
Yeah. The hard part of that is it goes back to most people's relationship with what they see online. So they might see somebody doing the splits and being able to go from a loaded 135-pound barbell on their back from a standing position, literally slide out into the splits, right? And like, that's cool, but you don't need to do that to be pain-free. Right. It's a really cool trick to have if that's your main goal. You don't need massive ranges of motion to do the things that you want to do. What we do need is minimum ranges of motion. The hip needs to be able to move a minimum of a certain number of degrees to rotate in and to rotate out. So I focus on the minimum requirements of human motion. You can take that to an extreme if you want to push the boundaries of your body. But even, and I actually just made a post about it today, I showcased that woman that we're talking about. She couldn't bend forward at the start. She was in chronic pain. When she would bend forward, her hands stopped probably around her knees. So very limited motion. And now she can literally kiss her knees and put her head between her legs when she bends forward. We don't even need 90% of that. We just need to make motion a little bit easier for most people. So I really focus on not showboating maximal ranges of motion. Nothing in my program, nothing that I do and teach I don't reward progress photos. I don't reward somebody's knees getting to the ground in certain exercises. I reward, how do you get there? What are you thinking about? And how do you coach and parent yourself through the tension? That's more important. Putting a guy like you in a seated L position, we didn't really need much more flexibility than that. More mobility would have been helpful is if you were to take a spill and all of a sudden you were folded over like a chair.
Yeah.
Does your body like recognize what to do there? Or is that the first time in years it's been folded over like that, right? Are we going to be able to get back on our feet and finish that race? The goal of more mobility with you was to get your body less adapted to running. So I have to check people's goals in a healthy way. What do you want to be able to do? Okay, you want to do the splits. Well, why? Is it just something that you've always wanted to do? Or is it because you've linked that you don't move like that person that you're following on social media, therefore that's why you need to go do the splits? And in reality, most people don't need to do it. Most people don't want to do it, but they feel like they need to do it because other people can do it. So it's really checking, what is it that we're really trying to do here? And to become well-rounded, it's to have a beautiful blend of flexibility and strength. It's to not go hard off the deep end. And, I think my misconception getting into this world of corrective exercise was feeling how stiff and tight I felt. Mm-hmm. And I would go see the yogi masters. They would like literally pretzel their bodies and they'd be smiling about it. I'm like, oh, that must be so peaceful. I must need that kind of flexibility to be a human again. And once I started to make my way into this industry and business, and I started to kind of develop this name and reputation for myself, these yogi people started to reach out for me for help. And they could contort and put their body in all these positions. And man, they were in so much pain. They were their body was so disorganized when it moved because they had competed to show off the biggest and best positions for years, that it almost, it kind of, it took the veil, it like lifted the veil up from my perception of what I thought I needed. And I realized, oh, those people are in as much pain as I am. Mm-hmm. It's just, they're on the other end of the spectrum with movement. So it's somewhere in the middle, man. We don't need that much mobility to be pain-free, but we do need some.
Yeah, I was told once, I'd be curious your thoughts on this, like with runners specifically, like there is, I think this was born out of like the injury frequency stuff, where it's like runners who are like too tight, they have a higher rate of injury because it's like, yeah, you're not even mobile enough to get through the gait cycle that's efficient for you. And then the other group that was just as injury prone was over flexibility. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they were able to reach these extremes, which when you put through force, they weren't able to tolerate. So it's almost they had access to something they shouldn't have, and they were able to get into areas that they got themselves into trouble, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's like, so there's like this perfect middle of, okay, you're flexible enough where your gait cycle, like the extent of your gait cycle is a very smooth pattern. You're not, there's no resistance, but you're also tight enough where like you get that kind of snap back. Whereas if you're too flexible, it's like you almost like venture outside of the optimal gait cycle to the degree where now you're putting extra stress in areas where they don't need to be going.
Yeah, and you got to understand that all of us we all exist on the same spectrum of movement. And on one end of that spectrum, we've got stiff, tight, stable, so hypomobility. Think of somebody who's very rigid, that muscle tissue structure is very tense and taut. And then we've got people on the other end of the spectrum, hypermobile. Think of your yogis, people who have incredible access to motion. If you take somebody on the right end of the spectrum, somebody who's tight, and move them into a yogi practice, they're going to probably feel it and most likely get injured. If you take somebody on the yogi, that soft, that hypermobility, that very flaccid end of the spectrum, and move them into strength training and Olympic lifting, there's so many options of movement that it's now disorganized, and they're going to abnormally load some joints more than others, almost a guaranteed injury there. And this goes kind of full circle back to our conversation. We become specialized with the things that we do. And where we work best is in the middle of that spectrum. To have strength, structure, and stability. I'm talking about integrity when we need it. So when you go on a run, the joints are actually moving forward and have these minimal rotational ranges to help dissipate force and tension. But we're not so mobile where force and rotational vector forces are like through the roof, and we are just excessively loading some soft tissue structures more than others. We really want to be right in the middle of that spectrum, never too adapted or too specialized. And what I see a lot of the times is people play into their strengths. So somebody who is hypermobile, you just you adopt this like mantra of how much more can I go? Always searching and looking for the stretch, right? Searching and looking for that release. Somebody who's on the right end of the spectrum, hyper stiff and hyper tense, you're never looking for that. And the more stiff and tense you get, the less you have to look for it, which means the less mobility work you do. So it's about keeping yourself in check and not allowing yourself to become any too specialized on either end of that spectrum. It's really important for longevity, not for short term, but for longevity.
Yeah. I'm curious about just like stuff that you can kind of get value from without having to like block off extra time and energy. This is like, once I kind of better understood where my movement patterns were problematic or what I needed to kind of do more of to make my movement patterns less problematic, I started finding like opportunities where it's like, oh, I'm going to be doing this no matter what. This is a non-negotiable. How do I like embed something into it that's going to be productive versus counterproductive? So things like, oh, I'm sitting in this chair right now talking to a coaching client. I can be rotating my ankles versus just sitting there completely still. Or I have my desk, but I also have this standing spot where I can put a slant board and stand on that slant board during this call versus just sitting in that chair. Or like that example we had where you had me sitting up against the wall. I can do that on my laptop and answer some emails. So I started finding like these different opportunities just to kind of like add into the routine that gave me more access to a variety of different movement patterns or different positions that felt kind of like freebies, more or less.
Yeah, there's a hero's journey in the evolution of a movement practice, and I've seen this time and time again with so many people. So at the start of this journey, you don't really have a mobility, like there's nothing that you're doing for self-care and maintaining soft tissue function. And then when you start and get into it, your first approach is like 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes. If you're really committed, it's an hour. And that is your window of movement for the day. That is your time to get in your mobility work. And then the other 23 and a half hours, you don't care. Movement is the last thing on your mind. And as you reconnect with your body and you reconnect with your nervous system, proprioception improves, your awareness of your body and all of its various states throughout the day improve. Your movement practice then moves into more of an expert level where there is no defined chunk of time. You're not carving out time every day to move. Movement is your day. And just like you said, you're finding all of these ways to integrate and embed motion. You're almost like sneaking it and hiding it into your life. And you no longer have a mobility routine. Your routine is now dosed throughout the entire day. And if we're looking at a human body that is constantly in a state of adaptation, yes, we do need that structure at the start, 15, 20, 30 minutes at the start. And that's going to help make some changes day over day. But the real changes are when you can start to incorporate these changes, these movements all throughout the day. And that doesn't mean you're doing weird things in line, standing at a grocery store. It's all throughout stuff. It's like maybe in the way that you pick up your kid. Each time you pick up your child, it's like a little practice motion to get a little deeper into your hips. Every time you need to clean something or pick up off the ground, you're not like robotic and textbook. It's just another opportunity to just practice and stay for a second or two in that deeper range of motion. Feel those muscles and tendons and ligaments just stretch out and activate. And then you're out of it. So you're constantly in and out of things all day long. And I think, I might have said this on the last podcast, but if you were ever to hang out with me in a group setting with my friends, if we were to ever have a trip on the weekend, I'm just like constantly in and out of positions and movements. You'll never see me dedicate a time for mobility. And I think that's how most people's movement practice evolves as they come back into their body after spending years avoiding it.
Yeah, that's actually one of the first things I recognized about Aaron when I'd hang out with him. Was like we'd be sitting there talking, and everyone was just kind of standing there, and all of a sudden he'd be like in a squatted position.
Yeah, just moving and rolling around, because
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
your body is telling you this is what I need right now. And for most people at the start, there's a disconnect. They don't know that they need a squat. What they think that feels best is just standing on one leg. Well, no wonder why there's an asymmetrical loading problem. That's the only way you're standing. And so just the process of reconnecting with yourself is quite amazing, how it fundamentally changes your movement practice over time.
Yeah, it's almost like the body like learns the patterns you put it through.
It knows. When I did a lot of one-on-one work, I never brought some huge strict protocol. I would let their body tell me what they need. What are the positions that you find yourself in? What are the positions that you find bring relief? Your body's telling me. It knows more about you than I'll ever know about you. I can only study you and observe you outside objectively, but you being hardwired to your nervous system, man, people have the answers, and the answers are looking at what you try to do when you feel discomfort. Maybe you feel back pain and you try to like shift your hips and rotate one leg inward. That's your body saying we need internal medial hip rotation and lateral trunk movement. Well, let's just go incorporate those movements a little bit more. Let's get a little more structured. Your body freaking knows, man. It's brilliant. And it's just a matter of understanding that wisdom's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, slightly different topic, and I don't know, maybe this isn't something in your like expertise umbrella, but I'm curious, so I'll ask anyway.
I'll try to tell you that I don't know the answer if I don't. I'm working on that.
Yeah, I had a guest on recently, Hayden Hawks, and he had a situation where he was racing the Western States 100, and he was like a contender to win it. So he was just gassed up, ready to go. And he ended up, it was like the Western States is a goofy race in the sense that you don't necessarily know sometimes until the week before exactly what the weather is going to be like. And some years they'll get a ton of snow and it'll be a little cooler early in the summer, and they'll have like snow in the high country. So you're actually running through snow fields versus trail for the first part of the race.
Nice.
Yeah. So this year it was kind of like that, where I think they had like something like 14 or maybe even 17 miles of like snow running that they had to do. And he unfortunately took a spill and like busted up his knee and had to end up dropping out. But it wasn't like, it was an acute in the sense that he was moving fine, relatively speaking, before that fell. No longer could do that on that day, but he had been dealing with some discomfort in that area that he was able to sort of work around. And it was like a bone spur that he had to end up going in, having surgery. I guess just like file down the spur so that his knee joint could actually move in the way without that interruption there. Are bone spurs in general something that are those always like a surgical remedy, or is there things you can do for bone spurs non-surgically that can alleviate that?
Yeah, so I loosely know about this, mostly in the sense of having people come to me, and this is more, I've seen this happen before. I don't think that this is an exact causation, or nor do I think it can always be treated with movement. But if we take a step back and understand, so use me as an example. So I'm wearing a shirt, right? A shirt is around my upper body. Well, around our bones is a very thin layer of tissue that the tendons hook onto. So the tendon doesn't insert itself into the bony structure. It hooks onto the slight soft tissue surface around the bone. If you are predisposed for excessive tension, like let's say there's a muscle imbalance. Let's talk about an Achilles, a heel bone spur. The soft tissue in the arch, the muscle is pulling on this soft tissue structure outside of the bone. And if you are exposed to an excessive pull for excessively long periods of time, what your body does is it builds new bone in between this tissue that the muscle's pulling on and the bone. So it's literally trying to close that gap, hence the growth and development of bone spurs. Now, that's not the root cause and origin of every kind of bone spur, but some bone spurs are caused by muscular dysfunction. And maybe you need that bone spur shaved off because it has grown so much that it is impeding motion and it's creating a whole host of other movement complications. But just like your body can grow bone, it can also dissolve bone too. your body understands the difference between your old hardwired genetic bone and new bony growth. New bony growth is not as hard and durable as the original bone. And so when you can alleviate this muscular pull, this excessive tension pull on the thin layer, I believe it's called the epithelium, this thin layer surrounding the bone, you can reduce the need for your body to refortify that bone in that area, and a bone spur could calm down over time. So not every bone spur needs to be surgically operated on. Not every bone spur is a random thing. You have got to understand that your body, for the most part, doesn't do things randomly. Your body doesn't say, let's go weaken this bone structure. Let's go create a bone spur here. Let's go develop stenosis, bone spurs in the spine. Your body does that to literally create artificial braces. It's doing with bone what your muscles are no longer doing, which is either preventing or restricting or eliminating motion. So if we can look at in some of the cases, let's go after the soft tissue dysfunction. Let's go after the over-tight muscles and the imbalances and the improper neural motor recruitment patterns. Let's absolve that first and see if that bone spur gets better. That can be an okay approach if you got a lot of time on your hands. If you're someone like that gentleman, an elite athlete, maybe you don't have 6 to 8 months to go mess around and find out. Mm-hmm. Maybe you probably do want something a little bit more specific. But at the end of the day, whether the bone spur can be reduced or resolved by treating gross motor movement impairments, or it can't be and needs to be surgically dealt with, at the end of the day, we are still left with what is that body doing that led to the creation of that? Could have just been excessive calcium in the diet that just gave new excessive bony growth material. Maybe that was a problem. Maybe it's a hormonal issue. In my experience, and this is where you're going to get a very biased answer, I'm a movement specialist. So most of the problems I look at with the body, I look at as movement as the cause and movement as a solution. I tend to think that maybe you can't heal bone spurs, but you can go after the underlying reason why there was a bony issue in the first place by addressing movement. The same conversation, and this might make my answer a little bit more real for people. Hip replacement. Maybe the bones have become fused or bony spurs, that the joint is bone on bone, really nasty. If you need to go get a hip replacement, okay, let's replace the bones, but what led to the deterioration in those bones? Why did that happen on your left hip and not your right hip? Right? And people's first answer, especially doctors that I've heard, oh, well, it's age. Well, how old is the left hip? Isn't it the same age as the right hip? Yeah. Why is the right hip not having the same problems? And that's where we've to not have the conversation of how are you moving? Could this have contributed to this problem? Would be to look at this problem not with a complete map here. I think movement is always a part of the solution, whether it is 100% a part of the creation of the problem or not. It is always a part of the solution. Why did this man have a bony spur on one side and not the other side? We could theorize why he fell on that knee and not the other knee. Maybe it was just a fluke. Maybe it literally was the environment. Or was it that one side was less stable than the other and it took a slightly slick surface? Would he have had the same fall in the same way if he had landed with the opposing foot on the other side? We don't know. And we could play the what if game forever. Mm-hmm. But it all comes back down to, I wonder how that guy stands on his right leg compared to his left leg. And does that have to do with anything? Why are there not bone spurs on the other? Or if there are, which side's more severe? How can we take a look at that? And is any of his movement the underlying cause? You can replace joints, like in a joint replacement, but you can't replace the nerves and the muscles around the joint. So if you've got neuromuscular dysfunction that is causing irregularities or deterioration in the bones, replacing the bones isn't going to fix that. Doing surgery on the bone is going to fix the bone part of it, but what led to the bone deterioration? I don't believe things just go haywire for random sake. Mm-hmm. It's always an action-reaction within the body. So what is that bone reacting to? What movement impact forces is this person experiencing with each step and stride that's causing excessive bony growth on that leg? more than the other leg. And we always come back down to how are the nerves and the muscles moving and distributing force and tension with each and every step. If we start there, we might not fix a bone spur with movement, but we can at least reduce its chance of coming back a lot. Mm-hmm. Or we can at least reduce other areas from now paying the price too.
Yeah, it kind of seemed to me like if you just got the bone spur removed and did nothing else, then like why would your body not just redevelop the bone spur down the road if you continue doing what led to that in the first place? It seemed like that would make sense to me, but
yeah.
So yeah, I think like even if you did have it surgically shaved down, you probably still want to address whatever movement pattern led to that potential bone spur growth in the first place.
Yeah, and it's the same conversation with back pain, and you've got a herniated disc. Okay, the disc has become so excessively compressed that the jelly on the inside of the disc has herniated and ruptured, and now it's pressing on a nerve. So that's why you're in pain. Well, people will just go get a discectomy. They'll cut out that part of the disc, or they'll get an artificial disc altogether. They'll replace the thing that broke. But we're not looking at why did you break down in that junction and not the level above it or below it? How are you transferring load and force every time you move? And if we just go into the surgery and expect the surgeon to fix it, which a lot of us do, because that's the way we treat a lot of these painful problems, how much longer until this problem comes back either at that same disc level or right above and right below it? And then now we're in the pool of chronic pain people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting stuff. I'd be curious because this is kind of a similar thing. What about arthritis? Is that if I just like start asking people or looking up like, what do I do about arthritis? You're going to see things similar to what you said before, like, oh, it's just part of the aging process. Mm-hmm. Now you've got arthritis. Now you just kind of have to deal with it. But then when I look at just like solutions to it, I see like, oh, well, movement actually is helpful for arthritis. And so then that's kind of something is like, well, people are probably assuming usage created arthritis in the first place. And so then it's like the answer is the problem to some degree. I mean, depending on who you ask, they're going to have their biases, like you said. So like people will say, oh, it's nutritional. You should be doing this differently. I'm sure you work with people who come to you because of arthritis. Is there a solution that you tend to lean towards or start with that sort of problem?
Yeah, so arthritis is probably one of the number one things that people come to me with outside of back pain, because I think people just resonate with my story. And if you look up on any credentialed source for arthritic symptoms, what is one of the number one treatment protocols? And it seems to be exercise is one of the number one things. And we look at exercise and we have to get very clear. Not excessive exercise, right? Yeah. To your point, sometimes the excessive use is what leads to the inflammation, which then triggers an arthritic symptom, and so on. And so the problems begin. Mindful, intelligent exercise, getting the nerves and muscles to be capable of moving the bones more efficiently, can offset or reduce arthritic symptoms. Some things can't be reversed. Maybe you can significantly reverse and reduce the symptoms of arthritis, which you can effectively manage through holistic healthcare exercises. You know, if you've got an arthritic joint, if you've got an arthritic knee, the last thing you would want is to stop getting the muscles around that knee to move the joint. And what's counterintuitive is that sometimes that joint motion is painful because the arthritis is there. But stopping is not going to help out at all. I believe, but even the podcast before I was on last time, you had a gentleman on, and he was talking about how just ceasing the activity, and I believe you were collaborating with this too. Just stopping the activity that hurts can actually make you more prone to injury because we're weakening the soft tissue structures. So if you're a runner who it hurts running, just stopping running altogether, that's not going to make your run better. It's going to weaken your body and almost expose you to a higher risk of injury. So it's about learning how to dose and pull back when you need to and go hard when you need to. The answer is never to cease the thing. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people look at healing through subtraction. Stop doing what hurts. But if we can intelligently do what might be uncomfortable, and we can continue to get these nerves and muscles to move better, we can improve joint movement efficiency, which means load and force can be better transferred throughout the body. So one less area is not taxed heavier than the other. If you're somebody who experiences arthritis, we want more of a teamwork when it comes time to move. If you've got bad knees, my gosh, we want those ankles and hips to be as optimal as possible to offshore and offload the excessive work that your knees are going through every single time you move. Having better access and more access to more muscles is only going to help arthritis. But there's going to be a curve. You've got to figure out where that line in the sand is drawn. From how much movement can I do that feels like I'm getting more blood and oxygen and nutrients, and inflammation is not the bad guy. Inflammation lets your body know that there is damage and there is something that needs to be addressed. So how can I create this like subtle amount of inflammation to keep things moving, but not overdo it to where I'm on the couch and I'm so flared up to where I can't move for 5 days? The approach of arthritis is the same approach to ultra running. How can I do it in a meaningful way that allows me to do this every single day, as opposed to just blowing my shot all on one day and now I'm flared up and I can't move for 6 days, right? So it all comes back to meaningful approaches that you can sustain long-term, and gentle, simple corrective exercise, you learning how to alleviate joint pressure by putting your body in certain positions. Oh man, it's going to be one of the number one tools that you have access to as a human being.
Yeah. Yeah, what you just said reminded me. I had a recent guest on who he had hamstring tendinopathy for like, it took him a while to get over. I think he said he was dealing with it for a couple of years, where it was like, you know, he'd be sitting here like we are, and he'd feel like he's kind of got like a golf ball jammed in between that hamstring and that lower glute area. And you know, he tried all the like typical stuff. He's like strength training and all that stuff to try to get it, and just didn't want to go away. And eventually, he went and got his form checked. And they found that just the way he was loading through his gait cycle was such that it was just like overstimulating that area. Mm-hmm. They tweaked, or they adjusted that so that his form was not adding that added pressure to that area while he was running, and it just went away. It was like addition by subtraction, sort of, where it's like, yeah, let's just change this little thing. We don't actually have to change the workload you're doing at all. We just have to change the way that workload is getting distributed around your body. And it was with his gait cycle that was the problem.
I think my story of, you know, going through a really wild, vicious experience with therapy and trying to heal my back, and the emotional toll of how many times somebody would tell me, well, you're not going to walk without assistance again. Forget surfing, forget walking, forget strength training, forget yoga. Like, you need to accept disability. I have a very big internal pushback to healing through subtraction approaches. I think most people will be able to heal through addition when you understand your body is not random. It's not doing something just because it's pissed off at you. It's doing something in a response to something else. So let's add something meaningful. Let's add a position, an exercise, a few movements into your world that change your form, that change your function, and let's watch how that issue clears up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, your back issue too, I mean, that was like an acute injury essentially, right? You like got thrown up against a rock.
Yeah, it was. The interesting thing about that, I can easily point back to the injury, the blunt force trauma of my lower back hitting a rock, the spine shifting 21 degrees to the left due to that nerve damage and compressive force. I can look at that as my moment of injury, but when I look back at all of my old elite athletic competitive days, man, I didn't move well. I could see the imbalances that I dealt with after breaking my back were significantly heightened. But I could see in almost every one of my adolescent photos, my right pelvis was significantly higher than my left. My left shoulder was significantly higher than my right. I could see the knee torsion in my left hip and my left knee in every single photo. I think the breaking my back brought pain to the forefront that made me take care of my body. But I struggled with movement problems long before the impact injury. And I know that there's a lot of people out there who, you know, it might be a car accident, it might be a fall, it might be a blunt force trauma impact injury that brings you into this painful state. yes, we can look at that, but in so many cases, these movement dysfunctions and impairments were just around for such a longer time than the actual point and moment of injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you do. I guess every time I've gotten injured to the point where it's like, okay, you got to stop running, I do always usually find other things that I had been ignoring. It's just like you need to clear some runway in order to like really assess things. And
that's the gift of injury,
yeah,
unfortunately.
It is, no doubt. So any running adventures coming up for you?
I have a marathon in the Redwoods. It's called Avenue of the Giants.
Okay.
So it's going to be May 6th. And, it's just I love it. It's just a marathon.
Yeah.
3 years ago, I was like, can I even do that?
Yeah.
So this is going to be just a marathon. And I gotta be honest. I don't know if my heart's in the race. My heart hasn't been in training. And that's the work that I've got to do. I'm not running into physical barriers. I'm not running into pain. I'm not running into any physiological roadblocks. It's now the mental and the emotional component of the discipline of being in those zones of marathon training. I've got the desire to do it, but that desire is being questioned. So I've got to go to that accountability mirror and turn it back on myself and do some harder, deeper questions. I feel a little performance anxiety. I had trained for this ultra marathon in Patagonia, and that was September 30th of 2023. So not too long ago, last year. And I got food poisoning 24 hours before it.
Yeah.
And so flying 6,600 miles. It was literally 6,600 miles halfway across the world to the most southern tip of South Africa, wild, harsh climates, the training that I had to put in to go do that. And to not even be able to show up to the starting line, that was hard, man. Mm-hmm. That was hard. And the opportunity was, it's not about the race. The medals are cool. I love the medals, but I understand it's about like who you have to become to even show up. The race is just a celebration. The ultra is the training itself. But without having that experience that I wanted, I think I'm a little performance anxious of going back into a big training cycle, because I now know that dissatisfaction of that thing outside, it felt like outside of my control, that prevented me from doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's the demon that I have to face right now. And every race, there's been different demons that show up. This one is the first mental and emotional demon that showed up that's really knocking myself off of that daily discipline to do it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I don't think you're unique with that in terms of like, how do you really kind of structure a program and an approach where you're finding the value on a frequent enough basis where the motivators actually do shift to a large enough degree away from the event to like being in that position where this is what I was going to do otherwise. Like had I not even put a race on the schedule, this would have been a rewarding enough experience in and of itself. And that can be difficult. I think because it's going to be different from one person to the next too. And it can change throughout your running journey too, where, there may be specific training blocks where for whatever reason it just comes easy. Mm-hmm. It's just like, I don't really need a lot of extra motivators. I don't need a lot of extra like assessment tools to show me that I'm making progress, because I'm just really in the flow of this whole experience right now. And then there's other ones where it just feels a little more forced. I find like when I start doing the same type of event over and over again, it gets more and more difficult to kind of find that energy and flow just naturally. And I have to pull more from like, okay, where is the rewards in like this specific aspect of the buildup that I can really focus on and pull those wins from and keep that motivation high enough to kind of stick with the routine and stick with the progress I'm looking to get. And sometimes for me, it's just like, all right, I got to step out of my comfort zone with the event I know I'm really, really good at, mm-hmm. and do something that I'm maybe not as good at, and see how much progress I can make towards doing something that's a little bit different from my expertise, and kind of regain that joy for the one I'm a little bit better at when I return to it, maybe 6 months down the road and things like that. So yeah, there's...
that's what I've noticed this time around is the intention is there, but the joy is not there doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think coming out of what was going to be the best. I mean, it's my second ultra, so I think I can say it was going to be my best ultra ever.
Yeah.
I learned all the mistakes from the first time. I took all of our training and I got things together again. And being in that state of that level of performance and dialed in nutritionally, and then having that, you know, food sickness, and then that kind of knocking me out for a couple of weeks, I found myself like trying to get back into the state of performance. And I had lost so much progress in such a short amount of time. The runs that were easy for me were now like,
yeah,
dude, I was on, you know, my hands are on my knees and I'm winded, I'm gasping for air. And I really struggled with that comparative mindset. It was easy the first time I was doing it because all of this stuff was new, and it was almost like there were new records and new peaks that I was climbing every week that brought excitement. Mm-hmm. And then after having that established, being out of it and then trying to start it again, all of that comparison, oh, I used to be able to do this 6 months ago. I'm so weak. I'm so out of shape. I can't, that voice is really starting to show up. And mm-hmm. I noticed the other day my watch died just before a run. It was the best damn thing that's happened to me in a long time. I don't know how far I ran. I don't know how long I ran, but I can tell you I did it with my dog and I had a great time and it was enjoyable. And I probably ran further and faster than I had previously because the watch was on. How do you not get in your head with metrics? Having done what you've done, how do you not eye it and have that dialogue all the time with runs?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely something that I have to think about because I am a metrics guy in the sense that I love the metric side of things. So to some degree, like it's funny because Nicole, my wife, she's the exact opposite. Well, she's not the exact opposite as a whole person, but when it comes to running, she's the exact opposite. She doesn't even wear a watch. She doesn't wear them at races, doesn't wear them at workouts, doesn't wear them at all. She just...
Is she happy? Is she a happy person because of that?
I think so. I think here's why I think it works for her. I think because her day job is very like precise in the sense that like she has to be metrics driven. She has to be like very on time, very like, you know, like on point. So when she goes out for a run, the last thing she wants is to be on point, to be directed to the acute details you can get with the GPX watches we have nowadays. Yeah, she just wants to go out there and just like work, you know, like work physically. And she gets more joy from not having access to those details, I think. So, I mean, as her coach, it makes it a little more interesting because like I don't have that access to those details the way I would if she comes back with a GPX file and all the details in it. So we find ways to kind of get what we need to get, whether it's like, oh, you're doing your workout with Rogue Running and you're going to run with so-and-so person. Well, I'm going to follow them on Strava. I'm going to get that data, even though you don't need it or want it. So
I'd follow her in a car just with my own GPS watch, just so she doesn't even know it.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where for me, I mean, this may just be something where like one of the things I found I get really motivated by is starting something away from optimized and then watching that progress develop. So like if I'm in your situation where I just did that run that I've done a bunch of times before when I was much more fit, much more ready for it, and I'm way slower now. When I see that, I think, oh, this is going to be a fun build up because I know how much progress I'm going to make between now and like the 8 weeks I'm going to spend focusing on this specific like task. And I like to kind of measure that. So the measurement almost kind of assists me in that scenario, whereas I don't think that would be the case for Nicole, and maybe it wouldn't be for you either. So there's a little bit of a personality thing when you're trying to solve that. It sounds like to you, you may benefit from kind of a hybrid approach where let's wear the watch, or there's different ways you can do this. One would be like wear the watch on workouts where we want to collect the data and actually take that information and make it actionable. But let's also reserve some space where it's just you and your dog and you're going to run as long as you feel good, as long as it brings you enjoyment, and you're not going to run a minute further than that. Yeah. So maybe that's 45 minutes, maybe that's 90 minutes, maybe that's 3 hours. And then we would just make space for that type of activity in your plan. So let's say it turns out to be a 3-hour run. Okay, well, we're going to organize the rest of your week, assuming you got your long run in for the week. Say it's 45 minutes. Great. You just had your easy 45-minute run for the week. We'll probably do a couple more of those anyway. We'll just plug that in. So it's kind of more of a reverse planning where you put the first mark on the board or a couple marks on the board, and then we build around it. So the stuff that feels a little more forced or a little more like I have to do this for the sake of getting better is part of the puzzle, but the other part is the other part of the planning is just kind of the intuition of what does your body actually feel like doing, which to some degree I like, because in a perfect world, you'd kind of go into a week or maybe even a couple weeks with this loose idea of, all right, here's like maybe 5 inputs that are really going to move the needle. But whether I do them on Monday of the first week or Thursday of the second week doesn't really matter that much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might matter, but it's going to matter to a very small degree compared to actually doing them and doing them at a high quality. So if you have that sort of like flexibility to, I'm going to go out for this run, and if today feels like I can just put that gas pedal down, maybe I'm going to do some intervals. And then if that happens, then I look at the list of things I was supposed to do over the next couple of weeks. Oh, there's short intervals in there. I check that one off. Maybe you go out on a day and it's like, all right, I feel really good. I don't want to go fast, but I just feel like I just want to run. I want to clear my head. I want to have fun out here, check out this new trail, get the dog exercise, stuff like that. And then it ends up being that 3-hour run. Oh, I had a 3-hour run scheduled this 2-week block. Check that one off the list.
A spontaneous.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think most people probably require some sort of middle ground with that. It's like, it's pretty rare that I think I find someone who's like, kind of like either me or Nicole, where we're like very, very skewed to one side of the spectrum than the other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of that becomes the kind of the puzzle to solve, though, is like, where do you kind of fit from, where do you fit in that spectrum of different kind of like motivators within that? The other thing you could try doing too is, sometimes this works, is if it's like kind of if you're having a hard time kind of disconnecting the event from the process in a way where you feel like, okay, the process is this thing that yields enough enjoyment, and then the event is something separate or a reward or a celebration, is sometimes when in those situations, what I'll do is I'll just start dropping in events that are less meaningful to me, but still present kind of the event lifestyle and the event like experience, because it is unique.
Yeah.
It's unique, and I think there's like, it's different enough that you kind of have some incentive, I think, to practice it in a way that makes it a little bit more second nature. So then when you do get to the event you're actually preparing for, you've dulled some of that like very acute difference in your mind, because it's not as separated from you. And this is difficult with ultramarathons and even marathons, because it's such a long kind of taxing effort. Mm-hmm. You're just not going to do a ton of them the way you would maybe if you're doing you think of like a cross country runner where they have like their 5-kilometer race.
That sounds so nice.
Dozen of them in a year, like, or in a season. And it's just like, so like you don't overemphasize. I mean, cross country teams do, because they have like a hierarchy of importance for these meets. But let's say you remove that, and it's just like you have these dozen 5Ks that you're going to do over like a 6-month span of time. Whether one is more important than other is not necessarily clear there, but you're going to get that same like sensation of, oh, I'm going to this race, this event. It has its own kind of energy to it. Mm-hmm. And I find like when people are kind of looking for some direction and it's not clear where to go, just signing up for some like shorter races, like 5Ks, 10Ks, that sort of thing, and just going there with like very little expectation other than like, if I feel good today, I'm going to push hard. If I don't, I'm just going to get the run in. I'm going to enjoy the community. I'm going to enjoy the environment. Kind of normalize the whole like, what foods do I feel best with eating before? Like, how do I like normalize getting to bed at night before an event like this, and the morning routines and everything that kind of goes into an event, and just start practicing that stuff without the pressure of, okay, I'm here to perform because I invested 16, 20, 24 weeks into this. Mm-hmm. And I think the further away you are from the goal event in terms of the way it's structured, the better. So like if I'm preparing for like 100 mile, in my mind, I've invested that I want to perfect that 100 mile. But if I show up to a local 5K where no one knows who I am or that I'm even there, I don't really care if I like run a minute slower than I have in the past, or, you know, what the end outcome really is, as long as I go there and I get that experience of, I went to an event, I performed, and I think you can start to kind of like learn things about yourself through those, and then start to kind of like just build a structure around like, what is it that's actually driving you to do this? And And then sometimes it opens doors too, because maybe you find out you just love 5Ks.
Yeah.
Because you can show up and be done and like go to breakfast after, versus like, I'm not going to eat a real meal until this evening or maybe the next day if you're doing an ultra marathon.
It's funny you say that, because I don't have a foundation as a runner. My first race was a marathon. And during that first race, I decided to be an ultra marathon runner.
Yeah.
This is before.
You went the other direction.
Yeah. This is before I ran past every aid station and hit a wall at mile 13. But I thought, I can be this guy. Like, this is exciting. How far can I do this? And so only having done a marathon and then going right into the sport of ultra running, there was never the baby steps, which is so funny because we're talking about foundation today. There was never like the little baby steps, the little victories, the little things that can bring structure and discipline instead of these huge swing events without that foundation there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think like, here's the thing, like let's say you do a speedwork development phase, you do a 5K at the beginning of it, you do a couple in the middle of it, and you do one at the end of it. You start kind of like getting value because you're going to improve. You're going to run faster across that spectrum of 5Ks. So like, you kind of come away with this setup where like, okay, I just did the speedwork development phase. I ran 4 5Ks in the middle of it as workouts, and I saw some improvement. I got some enjoyment out of it. There was some rewards there that are just like, that you would have never expected that show themselves. And yeah, I think it just puts you in a better position than when you do get to the race to say like, you know what, maybe I'll nail this. Maybe I won't, but whatever happens, I learned a lot when I did those 5Ks. That got me motivated to do the workouts alongside them and to do the right things around them, because I do think like when you put an event on the calendar, there's like a centering of priorities that occurs that's not there when you're just running by yourself. I mean, this even happens with group runs. I think I find if I'm going to go do a workout, like a speed workout with a group versus by myself, I'm going to have my stuff in order a lot sooner than I would because if I'm by myself, I got the out, it's like there's an opportunity. Like if I don't feel great, I can push it to the next day.
And nobody's waiting for you.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Whereas if I'm going to go to the group and I'm going to be working with them to achieve this goal, you get that kind of camaraderie, that sort of like team atmosphere. So then it's like, well, yeah, I'm going to go to bed at the right time. Yeah, I'm going to eat the right things the night before, or I'm going to do the right things before. So I just get a better overall experience. And I think when you get those better overall experiences, you start to get that kind of incentive to look at those things as higher priority items. And then I think that kind of almost takes care of the motivation side of things and the discipline side of things, because they kind of bring it with it.
All right, I'm coming back into my hometown with a little bit of a different approach.
There's a lot of 5Ks in Southern California.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm emotionally thinking about how great it would feel being at the start line of a 5K.
Yeah.
And I know I'm still going to pace it like an ultra.
Yeah.
But it's going to end a lot quicker, and there will be a lot less pain and suffering.
Yeah. It is. It's kind of like a simulation in the sense that you get the whole like, all right, the night before I know I'm doing an event tomorrow. I wake up in the morning, know I'm going to an event. I'm eating the way I would before an event. I'm behaving the way before an event. And then you get to the start line, you get that experience. You have like, I'm in a race experience. You cross the finish line experience. It's like everything that it's all the same things as the marathon or the ultra marathon. It's just that time in that one section of in the event is really, really short. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you wouldn't even have to go there and push hard if you didn't want it. I think maybe the first one, that would be the goal, just to go there and just run it and have fun. Maybe bring the dog. Some ruches let you do that.
Bring my son and push him in a stroller.
There you go.
We'll make it a family event.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Like you can do things like that where you're pushing your son in a stroller. So your expectation to run your fastest 5K ever has just gone away, because why would you expect yourself to run a faster 5K pushing your son in a stroller? But you could work just as hard. And then you had the value add of like, we just had a family experience. I just did something new. Yeah, you're adding more excitement. You're adding a whole lot of new stuff that I think just it's going to show you something. Whether it shows you the answer you're looking for, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but you will find something of value out of that.
And as long as I finish first with the parents pushing strollers, I think my ego will be fine, and we'll be on to do the next race.
Yeah, it's funny because there's this race coming up in May that it's actually a dog 5K where you bring your dog.
That's cool.
And it's a race. So like Nicole's like, are you gonna run with Minnie? Is she gonna win the first 5K? And I'm like, well, that depends on how many times she stops to use the bathroom.
Yeah, so that's the other thing is now that I got a dog, I got this mini Aussie, and we're starting to do runs together. My metrics, it doesn't look. I'm stopping to sniff flowers and potty breaks, and it's messing me up, man.
Yeah.
So we gotta change the focus a little bit.
Yeah, that is the other thing too. I know I have different expectations for myself when I'm running with the dog and not. And Nicole's way better at this. She can take Minnie out and do the workout the way she intended to with the dog there. Whereas for me, it's kind of like two very different things. It's like if I'm doing this type of run, there's no way the dog's coming. Whereas if I'm doing this type of run, maybe the dog can come along. I don't care as much.
What's the run that the dog's not coming on you?
Anything fast, because I don't want to have to stop at that in that scenario.
Yeah.
But I actually really, there's the value add for bringing the dog for me is if the goal is 100% easy recovery, I love having the dog then, because I don't get in my own, I don't get ahead of myself with that, where it's like, okay, I'm supposed to be doing this easy recovery run, but there was that one time on an easy recovery run where I averaged this pace. That's how I separate myself from the metric, because it's kind of like you said, you throw the stroller in the mix, you throw the dog in the mix, all of a sudden the metrics that you were imprisoned by are no longer something that you need to compare to, because it's just a different scenario.
Yeah, it's good advice. So get another dog and
a bunch of 5K races.
A bunch of 5K races, and problem should be solved. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for hearing me out on that.
Yeah, man. It was been awesome chatting with you, Vinny. Did we miss anything that you wanted to talk about?
We'll save it for the third.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, when are you coming back to Austin?
Soon. People are great, man. This is great. And I haven't put on running shoes yet out here, but I think I'm going to go try to get him running with Jeremy tomorrow morning. So
right on.
We're going to get some miles in, hopefully.
Jeremy would be a great guy to run with. He was just on the podcast a few episodes back. I think I titled it "The Rise of the Hybrid Runner."
The Rise of the Hybrid. That's a good title. All right, looking forward to seeing what this title is.
Yeah, we'll think of something fun.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on again.
Before I let you go, can you share with the listeners where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on any social platform, Pain Academy, all one word. And if you want to go to my website, I've got a free step 1 for people. I know a lot of the things that I talk about might not feel real or seem real to you, so I put together a free simple routine so you can just try some of these movements for yourself. Just go to painacademy.net and I'll help you out. I'll help you get that first step done.
Dip your toe in the water.
Dip your toe in water, and then we'll, one step at a time, we'll take it from there.
Right on. Thanks a bunch, Vinny.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Hey everyone, if you are here, you have stuck around to hear more about how I use the products that sponsor the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I have taken a lot of time identifying these products and brands, and I'm incredibly grateful that they are both products that I'm able to use sometimes on a daily basis, and they also are interested in supporting what I'm doing here at the Human Performance Outliers podcast and want to work with me. So here's how I use them. Last year, some of my trail running friends told me I needed to check out this brand named Janji Apparel. And when it came time to update my running apparel, I thought, okay, I'm going to check these guys out. I'm stoked that they want to work with me, because I've ended up using this stuff for way more things than I actually thought I would. My main focus when I'm picking out workout gear, and specifically running gear, is how does it actually sit on my body while I'm going through the different mechanics that are important to running or strength work and things like that. So the more a product can function the way it's supposed to, but stay out of the way, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So their kind of lightweight, breathable, moisture wicking type of setup works really well for me. Their shorts, their AFO middle short, I actually got 2 pairs of these, and I find myself using this for everything, basically. I've used them for short intervals, I've used them for long intervals, taking them out for long runs, easy runs. I even go to the gym with them. So I need both those pairs. I've been going through them. They have an odor-resistant tack to it too, so I can usually get a few workouts out of them before I need to wash them. And I just find my range of motion is great in it, regardless of whether I'm doing those short intervals, long run in the gym, doing mobility routine type stuff, or muscular endurance strength stuff, and all sorts of different activities. So that short is going to be in my rotation even when the temperature picks up. I got a couple long sleeve options too from them. There's the Repeat Merino long sleeve and the Rover Merino hoodie. So the Repeat Merino I've been using as kind of like either a base layer if it's really cold out that I'll put on first and then something else over it. Or if it's just kind of chilly where like a t-shirt or a singlet isn't quite enough and I may want it for part of the run but not all the run, or maybe I want it for the whole run but I don't want too much so I feel like I'm sweating profusely underneath that. This is perfect for that. So I'll use it over the singlet or just straight up first layer on and then something over top of it. The Rover Merino hoodie is one of the things that I'll use as kind of an outer layer. I'll put this over that merino long sleeve, and this one has a few extra features to it. It's a little thicker, so I can get away with it in a little cooler weather, but it also has like a hood that you can put up and then a face mask that covers part of your face that you can use too if it gets especially chilly out there. I've been using this both for the running workouts as well as taking it to the gym from a transportation standpoint as I'm getting there, and then during my warm-ups and things like that as something I can kind of count on. Both these items are super light and packable too, so if I do have a scenario where I think I might need it for part of the workout but not all of it, I don't hesitate to bring it because I know I can take it off and store it pretty easily if I need to without having to worry about feeling like I've got this like extra thing coming with me that is getting annoying. The next item I got from there was the tights. Now, tights are products that I am very skeptical about usually because I always end up having this situation occur where they either feel like too tight and restrictive or they feel like they're sagging on me. So I'm either feeling restricted by them, or if I don't feel restricted, I feel like I'm constantly trying to pull them back up or find a way to like fit them on me so they don't sag down. And it's just this constant battle where I just usually avoid wearing tights if I have to. These ones are much different than that. I'm loving these. I'm wearing these on all the cold weather days where I want that full protection layer, and they sit on me so perfectly. I can even stuff stuff in the side pockets. They've got these side pockets on either side. I put my phone in there. I've even taken my outer layer off and rolled it up and stuffed it in that side pocket. I don't feel like it's creating a situation where it's getting in the way or causing it to sag. Also, full range of motion. I've used this for faster runs and slower runs, and that's usually my test. If I can do a speed workout in the tights, then that's great because that means I'm moving through my gait cycle smoothly. And if they're not sagging on top of it, that's a bonus. I also picked up their Atlas multi-pant, which is a little bit more robust than the tights. So if you're looking for something for more of an outer layer, a little warmer, this would maybe be a little bit of an option. I've been using it on colder days for running and just as a way to wear something warm to get to the gym or during my warm-up during that. I love these because they taper down really nicely so I'm not catching it on the side of my shoe as I'm going through my gait cycle or a movement in the gym. But they also have these really long zippers on the side. So if I do want to peel them off or put them on, I don't have to take my shoes off or feel like I'm fumbling around with it a lot. They also pack. They pack up real nicely too. So you can roll them up into the back pocket. And then if I do find that I'm taking them off partway through a workout, I don't feel like I have this like extra piece of gear that's like bogging me down much. If you're interested in checking out John G, you can get a 10% discount. Use promo code BITTER10, that's BITTER10, and go to johnji.com. That's JANJI.com. And if you do like to shop at REI, they are also available there. Delta G ketones is a product I've been using for just over a year now. I started using them early last year as a test to see if it was something I was going to want to use in my training and racing. I wanted to stress test them in something longer, so I actually used them at the Rocky Raccoon 100 as my first kind of test of will these handle for the duration of a 100-miler versus just what I would notice in kind of day-to-day workouts and things like that. And they are something that I'm going to keep in my routine. So my basic go-to is the Delta G Performance. The reason I chose Delta G over all the other exogenous ketone supplements out there is they have a formula and a dosage that is supported by the research that we have to date. So they are the company that got the DARPA funding to design for special forces. They've been 50 plus published studies, 20 plus ongoing studies. My protocol with them is just to take a single bottle of that Delta G Performance before a key workout or before a race. And if I'm going to be doing a race that spans longer than 3 hours, I will take another bottle every 3 hours while I'm out there. So If you're interested in more details about exogenous ketones and delta G specifically, I would encourage you to check out episode 351, Exogenous Ketones and Performance with Brian McMahon. You can also, right now on their website, they understand that this is something that is new for people, and they want to make sure that you are using it right and that you know what you're doing. So you can do a free consultation with them if you go to their website at deltagketones.com. If you do decide, hey, I want to check this stuff out and see what my experience is like, you can get 20% off and let them know you support HPO by using promo code BITTER20. That's BITTER20 for 20% off at deltagketones.com. Element Electrolytes has been my electrolyte of choice for quite some time now. They're actually back sponsoring the podcast for the third year. It's how long I've been using them. I actually got my sweat test done last summer where I found out that I lose 614 milligrams of electrolytes for every liter of fluid that I lose. And it's not uncommon that I'll lose a liter plus of fluid per hour, especially when it gets a little bit warmer. So I'm usually using electrolytes in my workouts, especially as they go beyond an hour, or if the temperatures are a little bit warmer, or if I'm just going through a lot of fluids for one reason or the other. My protocol right now is I'll do a half a pack of one of their chocolate flavors in my coffee in the morning before my morning training session. And then I'll do another half a pack to a full pack of usually watermelon in my fluids that I'm taking on during and after that workout. Their product specifically has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. So you can go a long way with one packet. Some of the other flavors they have available are citrus, watermelon, orange, grapefruit, raspberry, chocolate, mango chili, chocolate caramel. They actually right now just rolled out their seasonal options. One reason to keep an eye on Element is they will do seasonal releases where they have limited time offers. And right now their seasonal option is chocolate mint, chocolate chai, and chocolate raspberry. If you check them out and you like that sort of idea of mixing something with your tea or coffee or your hot chocolate, if you want to make yourself some hot chocolate with this, you can do that. Definitely check out the mint and the chocolate raspberry. I love both of those. If you do want to try them out, you can actually get a free sample pack right now with your first purchase. You just have to go to drinklmnt.com/HPO. Put in that /HPO, and that'll offer up that free sample pack, as well as let them know that you're a supporter of the Human Performance Outliers podcast. One of the reasons I came across S Fuels originally is it maps my protocol perfectly. So at S Fuels, they follow a principle of right fuel at the right time. This means that they don't demonize carbohydrate, but they understand the power of a low carbohydrate diet. So throughout my year, I have ranging inputs between fats and carbohydrates, but they're always based in a foundation of fats. S Fuel's approach matches that just right. It allows you to build a foundation in your nutrition with fats, but also gives you options to pull that powerful lever that is carbohydrate when you need it. So in their product line, this is how I use it. Race Plus, that's their carbohydrate source. I'll use this for faster workouts or for races when I'm trying to defend muscle and liver glycogen. Train is their fat-based powder, which is basically a sports drink powder, but with fat instead of carbohydrate. Helps improve fat oxidation rates. I love it for workouts where I need some calories. I don't want to run a huge deficit, but I don't want to introduce carbohydrates. Side note, this actually makes a great high-fat smoothie as well. So if you're interested in that, check out my Instagram reels. I've got some smoothies on there that I've used this for. Revival is a protein powder that I will use post-workout and post-race a lot of times. This is something I can easily mix into something like full-fat yogurt or in that high-fat smoothie that I mentioned. Using this just makes sure I'm getting off on the right foot with the recovery process and maximizing my protein muscle synthesis. Next is Primed. Primed is my go-to caffeine source when working out. It gives you 80 milligrams of caffeine, but they make it in a way where it will help with focus, won't have jitters, and can help you with the fat oxidation benefits of caffeine consumption, as well as the reduction in perceived effort. Life Bars are my go-to snack. If I'm doing a pretty big training block and I need something between meals, Life Bars give me some healthy fats and protein that'll fit right into that. Finally, Keto 3. Keto 3 is a product that I'll use basically to replace anything I would have used granola for in the past. So I keep a bag of this around and I can sprinkle that on top of things that I would have previously put granola on when I want to keep the fats and the proteins high and the carbohydrates low. If you want to learn more about these products or check them out, head over to sfuelsgolonger.com where you can get 15% off your order. And this year, stay tuned because I'm going to be doing a series of free sample pack offers from those products that I just talked about.